So you trying to get into Milsim? No worries, I can help you out. Whether you have experience with airsoft or no experience at all whatsoever. We're gonna go through a few tips and information on this video. So come, follow me. Milsim can be a little bit difficult, depending who you ask. But if you have experience with airsoft, you pretty much have most of the stuff already done. So before I go further into trying to get into Milsim, what exactly is Milsim? Well, Milsim is basically what the word entails, military simulation. You're basically dressing up as a specific faction or country depending on what the organizer states or wants those specific factions to be. And you're basically competing with the other faction to either gain points or complete objectives in order to be eventually the winner of the game. You are basically LARPing being a soldier. Now that's putting it very simple. Different places, different organizers will have different levels of what they consider Milsim. At least in my own opinion, I've separated it in 3 different groups: a beginner, intermediate, and a more hardcore advanced kind of a Milsim. For beginner Milsims, I'm looking at mostly local fields that all they do is create specific little game modes, and the main idea is for you to dress in specific camo attire, right? Either based on a country's camo pattern or just a made-up faction that they created. And with that, you put one faction against the other to complete objectives. And that is the most basic way that you can have Milsim. For intermediate, we're looking at something a little bit more extra added to it. Now, aside from the previous stuff I spoke to for a beginner level, the pattern, the putting one faction against the other and completing objectives, intermediate is more complex. There are classes or types of weapons that you can use for each faction, which restricts one another depending upon the type of faction that they're doing. A good example that a lot of event coordinators use is Russians versus the US or NATO countries, right? So it kind of like restricts them only to their country's weapons. The other thing that they add is respawn rules, right? Depending upon whether you get hit, you might have to wait an extended period of time to go and respawn, or you can have a friendly revive you, right? And that all depends again on the event coordinator and how complex they want to make it. And primarily the one thing that I separate, whether it is an intermediate compared to a hardcore event, is the extended period of time that event is active, right? For the most part, the one that I would say is intermediate in my own personal opinion is Desert Fox events. Desert Fox events, at least the one I've gone to, is pretty intermediate. It's a good step up from just local field or very small level Milsim events, and that is because even though there are sets of rules, classes, and specific missions that you have to do, as well as also a night game, the events do not extend beyond a certain amount of time. They don't go for continuous hours. It's usually for like half a day with a rest period in between, and then continue on afterwards. So for me, that's what intermediate falls under, but where the surprise is on the hardcore events. Now, when it comes to hardcore Milsims, it's a totally different story, right? Same things apply from the previous categories that I spoke about, but now we're delving into something more complex. Hardcore Milsims, such as American Milsim or Milsim West, not only do they follow the same template that other organizations do, such as factions, missions, and changing styles of like reviving and all this other stuff, but they bring the additive of high stress to it. How do they do this? By having up to words of 32-hour operations, even throughout the night. And not just only that, but Milsim West is known very well for actually using blank ammunition. If you're not very familiar with black ammunition or firearms in general, it's basically a firearm that uses a cartridge that doesn't have a bullet in it, which means the only thing that'll emit is the sound. This adds a much more level of realism. And not only that, you're not allowed to leave the event unless you don't want to return to it. A lot of the event coordinators will say that you better have everything you need because you won't be allowed to come off of the area of operation or where the game is playing, because again, it intervenes with not only the aspect of the game, but the realism of it and everybody else. So take that in mind. If this is your first time going into Milsim, you don't really want to go for a hardcore style event and then either be disappointed or be overwhelmed by it because it's just too much of a thing. I myself am going to go to a Milsim West event, my first Milsim West event, and because I didn't want to deal with the aspect of, faction versus faction, I chose civilian because I like more of the role play style and the role playing just in general. So that to me is where more hardcore Milsim events come into play because of the LARPing and kind of interaction style as a civilian or insurgent faction. So now that you know what exactly Milsim is and what kind of levels of categories are there, where do we go next? Well, pretty easy. Do your research. What I mean by do your research, check out your local fields, right? If you want to play it safe and do a very basic, very local level Milsim event, see what your local fields are doing, right? Check their social medias and see what information they put out. In my example, True Aim, which is the closest one to me, has a once a month Milsim event during their fall and spring time. And unfortunately not during their summer, but that is due to constraints with the heat, and really the turnaround rate of people is not that much, so they choose to not do Milsim events during the summer itself. But let's just say you want to be baptized in fire and you don't care, you're a gun-ho, hard-charging individual and you want to do the hardcore event. Well, like I previously mentioned, the two main coordinators that I see that do hardcore events is American Milsim and Milsim West. And just as I mentioned, their next event is going to be the Azeri Revolt in Victorville, California. Now for Milsim West at least, I know they have 3 different types of factions. They have the actual enemy faction, which is usually Rust 4, and they have the NATO's, which are usually, US or NATO allies, right? But for Milsim West, it is done in a fictional area and in a fictional country, right? And they also have a faction known as civilian or just insurgents, is what other people that have played would call it. And mostly this involves, right, just individuals playing as civilians. They're basically the NPCs of the game, right? And that is basically what I'm going to do. So if you're looking to do something hardcore or even play it as safe as you can for a hardcore game, go civilian and you'll be able to still interact. You'll still be able to be around the other 2 factions depending on how the game is going, and be able to see how they deal with their own stuff. In general, being in a actual combating faction or just being a civilian and stand by and just watch, and that's all you do pretty much, right? So I would say, again, do your research on it. And before I give the final, at least you could call it a tip to getting into Milsim, one of the things that I wanted to address is manage your expectations. Milsim is a very specific kind of airsoft gameplay. There's several set of rules. It is not just running and gunning, right? is not just shooting your opponent, right, and being done with the day. It involves a little bit more complexity to it, and I understand that some people might be swayed away from it because of the fact that you have to follow rules. If you don't follow those rules, then you're not playing the actual game, and they could kick you out, right? Or you can just affect the experience of other people that are there for that are dedicated to the whole Milsim aspect of it. And you don't want to be that person, regardless of whether you care or not. You don't want to be labeled that person that is, either in a bad mood because you just don't like it now that you're actually playing it, or you're just not going to follow the rules because you're your own boss and you paid money to the event and that's it, right? So manage your expectations. There'll be moments, right, where you'll encounter probably people that are like that, right? There'll be moments where you'll encounter people that are the opposite, and they're very good individuals, right? And they're very supportive, even if they're from the opposing faction, that'll help you out, right? So just be aware of that, and manage your expectations. Don't come with the idea that you're a one-man army or that you're just not going to follow the rules, because that's not how it goes, at least when it comes to events like these. And finally, for the last tip that I have into getting into Milsim is have fun. Have fun. I won't lie, it would be a hypocrite of me to say that there hasn't been situations where I feel very frustrated either with my team that I'm assigned to, right? Or just in general the faction that I'm playing with, or the opposing faction, because of things that they do. And it's obviously because of the kind of the winning mentality that a lot of us have, of wanting to be the winner, right, and wanting to be the one that strikes there. But it's why again I mentioned manage your expectations, and just have fun, enjoy the moment, be it something that you actually are there to enjoy, rather than just making it, oh, I'm gonna win this. Because at the end of the day, you're just a silly airsoft player playing in silly, airsoft war games, right? And that's pretty much all you're doing. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about the video. Does this help you out a little bit? Do you have any more questions that I might have missed or answered, right? Just make sure you put them down in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video for more videos like these. This has been Manny. Until next time.